All right. Gonna go ahead and jump right in. This is probably gonna be a little bit of a shorter stream. Um, but this is a discussion that I wanted to go ahead and have for a little while now. I've somewhat covered it. Hey, Bullet, how's it going? But this is something that I've somewhat covered in the past, and I wanted to go ahead and get it all figured out, and just get all the information out there, how I feel about it, all that sort of thing. 1 second, I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Heard a sound and needed to go ahead and check it out. It is no big deal. It's just the dogs fucking around. Anywho, the teaching of weakness. Hey, Danish, how's it going? What's up, Chaz? But the teaching of weakness, it's something that has kind of been covered on my channel, but not in any real detail. And some people don't understand what I mean when I say the teaching of weakness. What I mean by the teaching of weakness is I'm talking about teaching a mentality. And you can either directly teach it, like you can sit there and constantly say that someone's being oppressed or that the cards are stacked against them, whatever, whatnot. You've got that way, but then you've also got the kind of subconscious way of teaching. Basically punishing people for when they're strong. But then at the same time, rewarding them when they show signs of weakness. There is a difference among all these things. And just take a look at our current education system. Starting from, grade school and going all the way up through. How often do we really reward internal strength? How often do we reward that? Almost never. It goes unrecognized, or it's even punished. Having the strength to ask the uncomfortable questions, you're punished. Having the strength to say what needs to be said, you're punished. Being so weak that you go running to someone else when something that you didn't like happened, rewarded. Being so weak that you allow yourself to be bullied into silence. Not into science. Science is a good thing. But silence. You get rewarded. Why? Right now, we are teaching weakness to future generations. And when I say we, I don't necessarily mean all of us here. I don't mean everybody's teaching weakness. But in current academia, people are being taught weakness. Hence, you have the oppression Olympics, because they're taught in academia that the weaker you are, the more you deserve. The stronger you are, yes, the more you deserve. But the more there is disdain. The more disdain you're deserving of. But the weaker you are, the more pathetic you are, the more accolades should be given to you. Does anyone else see a problem with that? I sure as hell do. If we're teaching people that they should be weak, then we will get weak people. If we teach people to be strong, then we will get strong people. Or at the very least, stronger. And I've said before, everyone has their strengths, everyone has their weaknesses. Fair enough. But when you reward the weaknesses and punish the strengths, well, they're going to develop their weakness. They're going to exacerbate it so that they keep getting rewarded. So this is more of a kind of me looking at the world kind of as it is, like how we got here, where we're headed. Because as we're progressing along, we are starting to, in more and more scenarios, teach weakness as some part of virtue and strength as evil. Well, people want to be virtuous. People don't want to be evil, generally speaking. So if you teach them that being weak is a virtue, then they're going to be weak. If you teach them that being strong is evil, they will avoid strength. Now, luckily, not everyone succumbs to this. There are some that are so strong that they have the internal strength to not care what others think about them. And I remember there was a time in recent history where that was the standard, where youth held that as a virtue, where being unique, standing out from the crowd was the way to go. But we have started indoctrinating these children so early on into believing that weakness is indeed strength and strength is weakness, that they don't know any better now, even when it's put straight in front of them, even when you have actual proof. They can't override that programming. At least most of them can't. But it's not that they can't, it's that they won't. Because they've been taught that using the strength of their own voice, that using the strength of their own mind is somehow wrong. Now, I'm not saying to support people when they're having a hard time. Everyone has their moments of weakness. It's human. But I'm saying to also recognize when someone is truly being strong, to reward them for that. Although most strong people don't need that validation. Is it appreciated? Of course it is. But it's not needed. If you're needing validation, you need to look at what you're doing. And you need to truly question whether or not you're actually being strong. And unfortunately, in this polarizing climate that we're in now, the old saying of, if you're in the right, you're going to make enemies. If you make no enemies, you're seldom in the right, doesn't apply. So it's one of those things where a lot of people are confused now. Hey, how's it going, Zeitgeist? But and actually, Chaz is bringing up a somewhat valid point that does kind of match up with this. He says, when men achieve greatness, they just do. But whenever a female does it, everybody has to stand and recognize it, or they're somehow defective. And that kind of goes in with what I was saying. Someone who's truly strong doesn't need the accolades. They appreciate it, yeah. I mean, honestly ask yourself, when you do something right, even though you're doing something right, it's nice to have someone recognize it. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that one. Well, not many people. You know, it's nice to have someone recognize it. But when the accolades are the end goal and not doing the thing right being its own end goal, you run into a problem. Because if the accolades are what is driving you, then you are more than likely, especially in this environment, going to be driven to being weak, to fostering weakness, not only inside of yourself, but in those around you. Because right now, the only people getting accolades are the people that are showing extreme weakness, whether it be mental weakness, physical weakness, emotional weakness, or just pretending to be weak. And the only way that you can get to a situation like this, because it is inherently against our nature, just as people. When we're born, when we're young, all of us tend to have some level of competitiveness, that drive to get better, that drive to get stronger. But then at some point, that drive goes away with us now. It didn't with previous generations, not in the numbers that we're seeing now. And as you go back generation after generation after generation, that drive lasted longer and longer and longer toward adulthood and into adulthood. And as we've progressed up to this point, that drive shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. We as a species hasn't changed. Not much. Not in any real observable way. But the thing is, something about our culture has changed. We've stopped teaching strength to our children. We've stopped teaching strength to the young adults that are on the cusp of adulthood. And we've started to teach weakness. We've started giving out participation trophies. We've started, another example, in the military, giving them stress cards. Now, anyone who's served in the military, who's been in a combat situation, do you think that waving a stress card in the air is going to stop the enemy from shooting at you? Or keep that mine from going off under your feet? Or stop that mortar from coming down on your head? No. No, it's not. And we wonder why we're having more and more casualties. It's because we're teaching weakness. Even in the middle of adulthood, we teach weakness. instead of teaching strength. We enforce weakness and we punish strength. And Zeitgeist, if you're unfamiliar with the stress card, basically what it is when you're in boot camp, you can go ahead and whip out your stress card so you can go and take a rest or something like that. You get so many uses of it. Or you can even take an entire fucking day off by using that stress card. And no one can argue with it. That stress card is basically an ultimate card. And it's a physical card, literally. I don't know if they've changed it to another thing, but when I was last hearing of it, it was a physical card. But at this point, when we are teaching weakness in so many facets of life, is it any surprise that we're so easily raffle stomped by anyone else? The problem with our culture isn't race. It isn't lack of diversity. It isn't necessarily gender. That is not a problem with our culture. That's not a problem with us as a species right now. Our problem is that we teach, reward, and enforce weakness. If we were to teach and enforce strength, do you think groups like Black Lives Matter would have managed to grab any traction? No. Any social justice group. If we reinforced strength instead of us rewarding weakness, would we have the Oppression Olympics going on today? No. No, we wouldn't. Victimhood would not be a prime currency. It would be worthless. People would know how to defend themselves. People would know how to lift themselves up out of the gutter. And quite frankly, we'd have less drug problems. We'd have less unemployed. We'd have more competition in businesses, less monopolies. Funny how such a simple concept can have such a large effect, isn't it? And that's where teaching mental weakness comes into play. Because that was the first weakness that they taught. They hammered out any form of free thought, any form of critical thinking out of our schools' education systems. So then no one knew that it was even possible to question what these people are shoveling into their heads. And so then they started shoveling in, oh, if you're part of this group, you're naturally weak and therefore you deserve extra protection. If you hold these beliefs, you're automatically a bigot and you need to whip yourself. That is the problem that we have. We have taught weakness for so long that when people are confronted with actual strength, they don't feel the need to rise to the occasion. They feel the need to go running to someone else or to a large group to knock that person down, because they've been taught that strength is something to be destroyed, not something to be celebrated, not something to be rewarded, not something worthy of being a goal. That is the reason why we are having a great many of the problems that we are having today. If strength was taught and not weakness, if strength was rewarded, and weakness was something that was discouraged, we wouldn't have people bickering back and forth about who has it worse. We wouldn't have people bickering back and forth about who's the most oppressive. We wouldn't have people saying, give me all this free stuff because I'm so weak. They have been taught that if they are weak, they deserve it all. And then we get surprised when people become entitled. Then we get surprised when people demand that they get more for doing less. And that they get it all when they give nothing. Why are we surprised by this? We've taught it to them from a young age. Those lessons permeate every aspect of our lives. So, of course, more and more people are going to become susceptible to it as we're being bombarded by it. And love, the thing is this isn't about men versus women. But if the women are going to go ahead and argue that, they will be ignored if strength is taught as a virtue and weakness is something that is taught to be avoided. And so then, based out of just sheer survival instinct, that change would affect women just as much as it would affect men. That's the thing about this. It is something that will snowball one way or another. Whatever direction you decide to choose, that's where the snowball goes. And it just gets bigger and harder to stop as you progress along. Unfortunately, our society decided to choose the direction of weakness. And now that snowball's gotten way out of hand. But there's always going to be that last minute catch point. And we're hitting it right now. You're starting to see groups like the MRAs. You're starting to see groups like MGTOW. You're starting to see conservatives start to rise. You're starting to see all these other groups starting to rise up. And even if they're lesser in number, they're already greater in strength. And then you suddenly start to see the tide turn. You see that snowball effect starting to break apart. Because those people rewarding strength, regardless of where that strength comes from. Doesn't matter if it's part of your own group or part of an outside group. Respecting strength. Admitting that strength has its merit, that it has its place, that it is indeed important. Well, these people, even the ones who have been brainwashed into thinking that weakness should be the goal, when they inadvertently show strength and they suddenly see the other side congratulating them on it, all of a sudden they start feeling pride. You start feeling good about themselves. And then the people that they've surrounded themselves with, the fellow people who have been brainwashed into thinking that strength is somehow evil, that weakness is the flavor of the day, that that's what you should strive to be, start to shame them. And they start getting a bad feeling again. And then they start associating having bad feelings with that group and good feelings with the people who support strength. And they find that it is actually easier for them to show strength because a great many of us have untapped strength in us that we don't even know about, that we don't find out about until we expose ourselves to new situations, to new challenges, and rise to those new heights. Whether it be through competition or just sheer self-will. They have made it infinitely difficult to truly be weak in today's society because they're sitting there saying, oh, we're so oppressed. We're so oppressed. Then why are you the ones being heard the most? If you're so weak, why are you the ones punching down? So even on this philosophical level, their argument makes no sense. Hell, they're being hyper competitive, trying to say, I'm more oppressed than you. All the things that they bitch about, they themselves do with gusto. But they've been taught that you have to be weak to do those things. So now they are a walking contradiction. And as Zeitgeist is pointing out, again, with gusto, with them being a walking contradiction, they become a laughing stock. People are afraid to be strong now. Why? And you would think that with the natural disasters that we've had going on, that they would get the message that being weak, nature doesn't care for it much. Nature doesn't give a shit about you bitching and complaining about what's happening not being fair. Nature isn't going to let up. The elements aren't going away. Nature isn't going anywhere. So the only way to navigate through this is by having the strength to do so, the strength to see your path forward, the strength to not follow the crowd into that whirlpool of destruction. And I know that this is going to sound fairly odd, but it means you have to have the strength to truly be strong. The fact that I am even having to say that sentence pisses me the fuck off. And it shows how ass backwards we've gotten. And the first step that we have to take is that we have to start teaching strength and not weakness. So that way, when our future generations grow up, they'll actually become adults and not perpetually stay children. We need to stop mentally and emotionally neutering our future generations. We need to strive for each generation to be stronger than us and pass that down to those future generations. That's the only way that we can actually improve. We need to stop glorifying weakness. We need to stop demonizing strength. If someone is strong and they're doing something that you don't like, then get strong enough to fight back. But get strong enough in the same arena. If someone's thrashing you in an argument, then you need to become strong enough in the arena of arguing to beat them. If some bully's wedging you every fucking day and throwing you into the garbage can, then you need to get physically strong enough to fight back. If you're in the current power structure, like another voice is saying, and you're scared of your population being strong, then you yourself are weak and are incapable of true leadership. It's time for you to step down or for you to get stronger. This argument holds true in any and all arenas of life. And so I challenge everyone out there, find somewhere where you are weak and change it. Not by bitching about it, not by complaining about it, but by putting in the effort, by putting in the blood, sweat, and tears needed to get stronger in that area and get stronger. And if you say, there's no area where I am weak, then stop lying. And another voice, I'm going to go ahead and address what you said. He said, adversity is our strength, not diversity. But diversity leads to adversity. But people are stopping at diversity being our strength. They're saying that adversity is our weakness. That's not it. Diversity brings challenge. Challenge and the overcoming of said challenge brings strength. There's a saying that pain is just weakness leaving the body. And you know what? In many cases, that is true. If you're out there exercising, getting physically stronger, it hurts. And if it's not hurting, you're not making any progress. Yeah, you can sit there and keep lifting that 2-pound dumbbell until you're blue in the fucking face. But you're not going to really make any progress. Any progress that you made is going to be dwarfed by that other motherfucker that moved up to the 5-pound dumbbell. And even more so by the person who's made their way up to the 20-pound or the 25-pound or the 50-pound or that motherfucker that's sitting there and lifting 150 pounds. You can see the anguish there as they're lifting. That discomfort that you feel when you bring up those uncomfortable points and have to argue your position is weakness leaving your mind. It's you getting stronger. That elation that you get when the other person has to concede defeat. That's your reward. And you notice I said that you get. That's not given to you, but that you get. Stop caring about accolades from other people. Appreciate them when you get them, but do not exist solely to get accolades from others. Have the internal strength to have strength itself be the reward. But also have the strength to make sure that you can have enough strength for some level of compassion. And that is a hard thing to do. When you can easily just crush someone in your hand. It's hard to remember that they are a person too. That they have their own strengths. Maybe they're not strong in the arena that you're currently in. But I highly doubt that you could beat them in every single arena of life. So that person may be the underdog here, but they may be your better in another area. But the thing is when you're truly strong, you don't want to eliminate your competition. You want your competition to get stronger so that you can, once again, improve yourself and beat them again. That is true strength. Is not being afraid of the challenge, but also having the knowledge to know when to fight, when it's time to prepare. And yes, even sometimes having the strength to turn away from something. But that's combining multiple arenas of life. The arena of forward thinking, the arena of current strength, and the arena of cost benefit analysis. You can break down life into so many different pieces that no single person throughout their entire lifetime could mention each of them even once. And if you can't mention them even once, then that means you are not going to be the strongest in every single one. And that is fine. Get strong in the arenas that are important to you, that affect your day-to-day life. And make sure that you are actually strong before you try to belittle others. A weak person belittling someone else is pathetic. If you're proud about being weak, then it's false pride. And you've been drinking the Kool-Aid for far too long. If you're afraid of strength, then that means you're afraid of addressing your own weakness. The way that we avoid that, start teaching strength at a young age. Stop teaching weakness. Stop giving out the participation trophies. Bring back competition. Because competition drives us to do better. Competition builds strength. So if we want to solve these problems, we have to solve the root of the problems. Because we can put Band-Aids on it all day, every day. It's not going to stop the hemorrhaging. You want to start the healing process? You have to start at the deepest part of the wound. Or else it's just going to reopen over and over and over again. Another voice says that compassion for the weak creates an enabling environment that weakens individuals even more. I disagree. Compassion will not weaken people, because showing compassion for someone means that you're sitting there and trying to help them improve. You're trying to help them get out of that situation. And some people do need that help in some areas. This is true. But compassion isn't going to weaken them. Acceptance of weakness will. That is the difference between compassion and acceptance. Compassion is picking your opponent up off the ground, reaching down, grabbing them their hand, hauling them up, and telling them they're not allowed to give up. Acceptance is you bending down, picking up their fist, jacking yourself in the jaw, and then pretending to be knocked out so that they can win. There is a major difference there. And Turbattle brings up a good point. Ideologues seek power under the veil of weakness. That's very true. Take a look at ideologues throughout history. They've always talked about oppression. They've always talked about how life was unfair. Very rarely did you hear them talk about them needing to get stronger. They always talk about something like legislation or assassination, the underhanded ways of getting rid of your opponents. Not through the strength of yourself, not through the strength of your arguments, or even your physical strength, but through having people feel so sorry for you that they throw the fight. Those people who throw the fight, those are the ones who enable weakness. Not those who sit there and say, anytime you want to fight, come back, I'll be here. Another voice says, I'm saying giving a homeless drug addict cash because you feel sorry for them enables their lifestyle. Same with welfare programs. I actually do agree with you on that. I do. But the thing is I don't give cash to those people. You know what I do? I'll give them a hamburger. Something that will nourish them. I am enabling them to be able to build up their strength. And if they refuse it, then I will never give them anything ever again. If they were strong enough to refuse it, then they're strong enough to go out and better themselves. That's how I look at it. Some people say that that's harsh. Some people say that that's cruel, that maybe they weren't needing food, that they were needing something else. I don't care about the other things that they need. I care about them being able to build up the strength for them to get themselves out of that situation. I don't believe in free handouts. And me giving that person that burger isn't a free handout. The reason why It's because I'm handing that to them so that they can have the opportunity to either succeed or fail. Period. Sometimes, another voice, you're right. Sometimes to help someone who's weak, you have to turn your back. Make them stand on their own 2 feet. That is true. But every once in a while, helping them up onto their feet, that might be the boost that they need. And then they'll never end up on their ass again. Because they never want to end up on their ass again, but they don't have the strength to quite stand up. Everyone needs a little bit of help at some point in their life. Exactly, voice. He says once or twice, then no more. Exactly, because if they're having you stand them up every single time, then their muscles for them standing up are going to atrophy and they'll never be able to do it again. At that point, you are causing more harm to them. I do agree with you there. And I'm putting this into physical terms, but I mean, this goes for emotional, mental, whatever aspect of life. It all holds true. And Turbattle, I actually already mentioned strength being penalized. In fact, I've mentioned it several times during this stream. But you've been around long enough, you know how my streams go. I always round back onto subjects. But I think I've rounded back onto that one and stomped it into the dirt. But there are people out there that want to succeed, that do have that drive, but they actually just need some help getting up and running. I've seen those people. One of my friends, he was actually homeless. He was contemplating suicide. But one day someone actually stood him up, physically stood him up, took him home, let him shower, that sort of thing, gave him a meal, and then the next day asked him an important question. What do you want to do now? My friend said, I want to go out and try to find a job so I can repay you and I can get my own place and I can stand on my own 2 feet. That person let them stay rent-free in the house for 2 weeks while he found a job. Then, of course, waited until he got his first paycheck, took a small amount of rent, basically just enough to cover the electricity for the hot water that he used and the light, and then refused to let him pay him back so that he could get on his feet faster. Thing is now my friend is a manager of a company and is getting ready to start up his own business. The funniest part was that other person that showed him that kindness had a run of bad luck. Lost their job and all of that, lost their house. Well, now that other person is not only renting from my friend, of course, at a low cost, he's forcing that other person to let him pay him back. But that person is also going to be one of the startup employees at my friend's new business that's going to be opening up in a month. My friend went from homeless, weak, and on the verge of suicide to becoming stronger than the person that helped him back up so that he could force that person to not only start being competitive with them, but also to force that person to allow him to pay that person back. That is called the cycle of strength. And the fact of the matter is, many people would look at that story and say that my friend is being an asshole. Because we teach that strength is wrong and that weakness is what should be strived for. And he just went in the exact opposite direction of that. Have a good night, Bullet Machine. Zeitgeist says, here's the thing, government has manufactured a lot of homeless today by creating systemic risk and inflation, and it'll get muddier and muddier. Who got there by their own fault? Some people did get there by their own fault. Some people just chose not to work. I've met some people that said that they choose to stay homeless, that they could go out, they could get a job, but they just prefer to be homeless. Why is that? Oh, because we're taught that compassion means unconditionally supporting. That isn't how compassion works. Compassion means helping someone while they need the help. If they are choosing to be in their position that they're in and choosing to stay in it, then they don't need your help. They've made their choice. At that point, the compassionate thing is to turn your back. Just walk away. Eventually, they'll get to the point where they have to assess their better options. That's it. It's very simple. But you notice I'm saying to help someone when they need the help. If someone gets hit by a whole bunch of bad luck shit, and you're sitting there just looking at them like, ugh, and you get that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach, right there, you're probably empathizing with them, or you might even be sympathizing with them. You might have been there at some point in your life. Or you might be thinking that you might be there at some point in your life. At that point, you need to act how you wish someone else would act if you got to that situation, how you wish someone would have acted if you've already been in that position, or you need to act how you would hope that someone would react if you're empathizing with them. But the thing is it's also an opportunity for you to become a teacher. You can teach someone how to be strong by showing them how to be strong and by not putting up with their bullshit. Hey, Neo, how's it going? But that's the hardest part, is knowing where the line between compassion and enabling is. It's a very blurry line because it depends on the situation. It depends on the individual. It depends on the very moment of time that you're making each of these choices. One example of that, I'll go ahead and I'll make this personal. One example of that, I was sitting there trying to find a job for quite a while. Every time I'd go in, I'd do the interview, and at the end of it, I was being told that I was overqualified. All I wanted at that point was just a job so I could go ahead and get back up on my feet. That's all I wanted. But the fact of the matter is, they weren't going to give me a chance. Why? Because they were afraid that I was going to take their positions. One of them actually at least had the strength to admit that, straight to my face. He said, if someone says that you're overqualified, they're either afraid of being used as a stepping stone, or they're afraid of you just taking them out of their position. Everyone says put your best foot forward in an interview. So I did. I came in guns blazing. And it always got the rug pulled out from under my feet. Again, that comes back to us teaching weakness. So that's my personal story. I'm sure you all have your own personal stories where you've encountered this. Honestly, think back in your life. Think back in your life where you being strong earned you disdain. I'm sure that a lot of you will have at least one moment of that back in school. In fact, probably a vast majority of the biggest instances were back in school. Now, why would that be? Oh, yeah, because our education system is going out of its way to instill weakness. And you can sit there and you can say it might be for any amount of reasons. But don't lose fact of the fact that it is happening, that is something that's going on. And there's multiple reasons for it. But the real question is what are we going to do about it? Because it's easy to bitch about a problem. Changing it is the hard part. Fixing that problem is the hard part. But we're starting to see schools now starting to reject it. We've already started changing it by even recognizing that it's there. I'm not the only one who's recognized this. Hell, I might not even be the only one putting it into these exact words. I haven't heard anyone else bringing this up. Not to the degree that I'm bringing it up now. But the fact of the matter is people are noticing. People are stopping respecting degrees that we're getting from colleges because they are enabling weakness. They're not just enabling it. They're saying that you need to be weak. They are teaching weakness from the ground up. And now we're starting to see other schools where actual youth are being taught, starting to reject it, starting to get rid of these teachers that are teaching weakness and making room for teachers that are teaching true strength. That aren't sitting there and punishing a bully because he looked at someone wrong. Yes, punishing the bully for when he beats the living shit out of the other kid, but then also telling the other kid that there were probably ways that they could have gotten out of that anyway. Have a good one, Neo. Have a good day at work. But the fact of the matter is we're starting to see a change. And that's a good thing. But that means we can't be complacent on it. We have to continue doing our part. And that is leading by example. That is showing people that you succeed when you show strength, and that you can succeed even more so than that person that played the "oh, poor woe is me" card. Because that person who plays the "oh, woe is me" card will constantly be questioned as to why they have success. Was that success handed to them, or did they earn it? Well, if you start up your own business from scratch through your own hard work and sweat and tears, there's no question of whether or not it was handed to you. The fruit of your efforts at that point are unquestionable. But if you go into a job saying, oh, you don't have enough of my people in positions here in leadership, so you need to hire me straight into a leadership position. Not everyone's going to know that you did that, but that question will always loom there. And you will never have as much respect as that person who worked at that company for years upon years, worked their way up through the entire chain to get where they are. It is very possible for a department manager at a store to be respected infinitely more than the CEO of a company. Let's see. Zeitgeist is saying, thought for you, Ryu. Reverse university discrimination. If you have a degree, then your decision-making skills are too poor to work here. That's actually part of what's bringing about the change. I'm actually for it at this point. Because if you look at most universities, what's up? You know, it's all like, if you have a degree from a university, more than likely you had to go through some feminazi course. You had to go through some SJW mind washing. And companies don't want that. They're starting to see that these people are making decisions based not off of empirical fact or off of the situation that's actually happening, but off of what they feel, which quite often flows contrary to reality. So not only are you not good with money because you sat there and just spent money on that piece of paper, so your financial decision making is being called into question, but then also at the same time, you're not good at judging your situation. and you've been actively taught to perpetually bow to people who are bitching and whining and pissing and moaning because they're either too lazy or so brainwashed to think that they don't have to work hard. For what they get. They think for some odd reason that shit should just be handed to them. Just because they want something, they should have it. And here's one way to know if you're in a social justice course that's sitting there and trying to say, we're teaching you critical thinking. Day one, be critical of the class. If you get kicked out, they're not teaching you critical thinking. Because you cannot squash critical thinking while saying you are teaching critical thinking. But again, that takes strength. You have to have the strength to not be afraid to get kicked out of that class. And then you have to have even more strength to go ahead and make it known. So other people won't take that class. So they won't respect it. Oh, and thank you, Zeitgeist, for tossing that bone out there. I got a lot of chewing in on that bone. Thank you very much. I think you should toss that bone out into other MGTOW streams. Let them go ahead and chew on that bone. It's tasty. Thank you very much for bringing it here. But yeah, I mean, there's really not much more that I can say on this. I think I've pretty much covered just about every angle without going into the micro level on it. And I really don't want to go into the micro level on this because at that point, this is going to be an 8-hour stream followed by another 8-hour stream followed by another 8-hour stream, you know, times 10 to the 7th power. But the thing is leading by example is actually having a huge, huge effect. We're starting to see it happen. Yes, there's going to be these people trying to fight back, because the thing is to them, weakness is actually somehow been perverted into being seen as strength. And that's the reason why they fear stuff like MGTOW, like the MRAs, like Trump, conservative values in general. Because conservatives tend to think that if you want to eat, you should have to work, regardless of who you are. Doesn't matter your skin color and all that. You should have to put in the effort. But that effort should be rewarded. And that laziness should be shunned. Basically, strength and drive should be rewarded. And laziness, weakness, and lack of drive should see nothing more than people's backs. So have yourselves a great day. Thank you everyone for coming to the stream. Like I said, I was already planning on keeping it somewhat short. I got a few things that I need to do today. Anyone who hasn't gotten onto the Discord, what the fuck? Why aren't you on there? But yeah, looking forward to talking to you guys on Discord as well. If you have any other questions on it, go ahead, ask me on Discord or in the chat here. It doesn't matter. If you're curious about the Discord link, I got it down in the description here and also in the about page on my channel. Have yourselves a nice day. Peace.